are live. What's happening, good people? Welcome to House Culture Conversations. Hey, DJ Dewey P, what's happening?
What's up, DJ DLott? Good to see you, brother.
Man, good to see you as well. Hey, the holidays are upon us. You got your lights on in the back. I'm feeling kind of festive.
Holiday party lights.
Turn on them party lights. Turn on them party lights. Who was that? Who I'm thinking?
Slave.
Yeah, that's Slave right there. Hey, that's worth 200 points in House Jeopardy tonight. You feeling good though?
Feeling pretty good. We got a great guest.
Yes, we got family tonight. Family in the house tonight. We're gonna be talking it up with family and a hit maker. Okay, bonafide hit maker.
Grammy nominated. Should have won. They stole it from you, E.
Hey, well, let's get them on out here. Tonight, our guest is none other than the hit maker himself, ESmoove. What's happening?
Yes, y'all. The band is back together.
Yeah, the band back together. Hey, I used to carry the records. I remember that.
I didn't notice you carrying the records, man. I did not notice the record carrier factor. Never did I say my back is a little bit better because Lott is carrying the record.
It was always something to carry. That's for sure.
I noticed that.
Maybe I showed up right after the car got packed. Maybe that's what happened.
That's what I'm thinking. Like,
Oh my gosh.
I think
we gotta stay on schedule. See, this is gonna be out of hand. We gotta stay on schedule. How are you? How are you doing in the midst of this COVID and all this stuff going on?
I am extremely blessed. I have no complaints. Family is good. Unfortunately, I lost my mom, so I can't just say directly family is good. But even in that is a blessing because she is no longer hurting and in pain and all of that. So it's always a blessing.
Hey, well, good. Hey, we're sorry to hear about your mom, but to your point, hey, you got an audience already building up out there. Bob Peters, what's happening, Monarch?
Monarch's in the house.
Hey, and we got Babu all the way from New Zealand. What's happening? Right. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh my gosh. Oh, hey, what's happening? Akusa. I can't pronounce
that is Lauren.
I know it's Lauren, but I try to call her a name, because she put it out there. What's happening, Lauren? So good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
She's in the witness protection program.
I don't think she's gonna be happy about that, but we'll see. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Eric, tell folks a little bit about you, those that may not know your story. A little bit about where you're from and so forth and so
on. Born and raised in the South Side. There's my wife representing. Born and raised on the South Side. Started out DJing with Dewey. Our story is legendary across the South Side, not the South suburbs. We ain't make it there yet, right? Went to Mendel Catholic, the disco capital of the world, house music capital of the world. Only second to maybe Kenwood as the house music capital. No, we ain't even gonna. Yeah, you're right. What am I doing conceding that? No, Mendel number one. And our fallen soldier who is not here, Bill Morton. We got our start all together DJing and debuting on that Mendel stage. And then the rest kind of just happened.
I talk to Dewey about this all the time because, even when you guys got into it, there was just something about it for you guys. You guys were passionate about it. I remember being in your basement and you was just, spinning records and just spinning records and spinning records. What was it about being a DJ that just, captured your attention?
I think for me, it was a little bit of the pre-culture that happened. So, and I talk about this all of the time. There is house music, the genre, and then house music, the culture. And we experienced that house music culture in a few different ways as it developed. I am lucky enough to be friends with a lot of the people that, the guys, the DJs and stuff that were, that are icons, but were our heroes coming up. You know what I mean? And so they laid a groundwork that, in this culture that we were exposed to. I mean, early on, when you think about the Herb Kent Punk Out show, and that stuff that was going on, our first parties that we attended at Mendel, long before we started DJing, house parties that were going on. Wayne Williams was a huge influence in all of that, and learning those stories and reconnecting those dots years later from what you live to now, how it's grown, and just all that is just mind blowing. I can remember me and Dewey being at the Penthouse. So we would get to go to, quote unquote, the parties, right, through a neighbor of mine, Ronnie Oden, who has since passed as well. And we would ride with the fellas, Randy Roberts and Zach and all those guys, and we would go to Sowers in the Penthouse or whatever. And I can remember being at a party at the Penthouse, and we got close to what was probably some type of coat room that they were using as a DJ booth. And we could see into there, and you could see the 1200s going. And I believe Wayne was spinning, and he was playing Call Me by Sky, and the drums, the dum 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 dum, and he kept starting that part over, and I was just mesmerized. I was just like, out of here, right? And then another memory, and I don't know if this is the same party, different party, maybe Dewey remembers, right? Farley was DJing, and I saw him pitching the turntable, the 1200. But at that time, didn't know it was a pitch, thought it was the volume. And I'm like, oh snap, he's turning it up. and just, that naivete in there, in that experience, but just being completely taken over. I mean, to the point, I know my father was frustrated. I know, you know what I mean? Just like, what is wrong with you? You just stop running track. I was on the track scholarship with Mendel. Stop running track. I was obsessed and thought of nothing else. And that is that culture. I mean, just, it's so much to that culture, so many tentacles and stuff that I think everybody has their individual experience, but at the same time, a collective experience that you just understand. When you think
So, Dewey, you remember that party at the Penthouse, Dewey?
Oh yeah. Yes, I do. We both looked at those turntables like, I can't believe what's happening here. What's going on? What do you think that is?
Right.
We mesmerized.
And the Clubman mixer.
Yeah.
Right. Do you remember the simple Clubman mixer? Yep. The 2 channels, bam, bam. I can remember Jesse Saunders going back and forth. He was doing a where you repeat the line, like beat the street, that beat the street, that beat,
Yeah.
And I can remember him going back and forth with that Clubman mixer and just thinking, I want to do that.
Yes.
Man, when you think way back to back then, all the way up to now, why has house music persisted and expanded all the way around the world? And you've seen success as you've moved out of just DJing. And this thing has been explosive. Other art forms and genres have come out of it. Why do you think that is?
I think that the simple answer, house is a feeling, right? It's a feeling, it's a feeling. And that I can attest to. I've seen it all over the world. I've been in a party in Israel and had the same vibe. I've been at a party in Australia, had the same vibe. I've been at a party in Spain, had the same vibe. So I know that feeling is all over the world, right? So that feeling that we had at the Penthouse, I've experienced that in other places, which is like, well, how did y'all get here? You know what I mean? I know how I got here. How did y'all get here? So I think that stands true, that house is a feeling. But I think also, from a business standpoint, house is a way to sell goods. House is a way to set a tone. House is a way to dictate a lifestyle. Yeah, I mean, I just think that just holds true. And maybe it's dance music as a whole. You know what I mean? Maybe it's the positivity, maybe it's the gospel influence, et cetera, et cetera. But I can just speak from my experience that house, is just a universal vibe that can go in a lot of different places. And I think that one thing that I don't like, if I could talk about, a negative, I try to keep things positive. I think that we as the original Southside African American, we don't let it grow as much as it has. We don't acknowledge the growth, So when it's EDM, we judgmental. When it's techno, we're judgmental. When it's such and such. But all of that is still based on that original feeling. And when you think about it from that perspective, what some kids on the South Side created that could go all over the world and go to and be $1 billion business. You know what I mean? Billions of dollar business, For whatever reason, we don't like it when it goes mainstream. We like to keep it underground and,
Right.
and in our dark spaces.
Right.
And poor.
Yeah, and poor. We don't want the money. No. Oh, you make the money? Oh, no.
Oh my God. Now you evolved and started producing.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about how you got into it. What was the inspiration to move in that? Was it a natural, progression to start producing tracks?
So, again, I talk about the tentacles, man, the tentacles, right? So as a result of losing my track scholarship in Mendel, my father was like, we won't be paying for that. we won't be paying for these grades. and ushered me off to Lindblom. And I spent a semester at Lindblom. And in that semester at Lindblom, I went to school like maybe 3 days out of the whole semester. I was at school. I was in the bookstore. But what I was doing, and this is debatable because I got kids now. I don't know how I feel about my kids doing the same thing. But what I was doing was I was learning my craft, right? So I was hanging out with Hans and them passing out flyers. I was hanging out with E.T. and Hurley and Rick Peck and those guys and going to record pools and all the type of stuff that they were doing as 19, 20-year-olds. I was hanging out as a 14, 15-year-old. You know what I mean? But I was learning the craft there. And part of that experience was building relationships and all of that. So when you fast forward and you think about, maybe this is a memory Dewey will remember, again, being at McDonald's on 87th Street, McArnold's, right?
McArnold's.
And Hurley was there with a little bitty Casio keyboard. And he was playing the drum track on the keyboard. And he was playing the melody from AEIOU, right? So when you think about that as his entrance into production, right? You think about the impact that had on me at that moment, not knowing anything about my future, and then us connecting later on. Now I started producing records before I connected with him. But it was his groundwork and Chip E's groundwork and Mark Belcher and Kelly's groundwork is MK2. That was the first time I was in the studios with MK2 when they were making Used by a DJ. Just all of that tied together, that with one person, Jesse, making a record, right? I can remember him having his 808 at Mendel in the basement, right? And then that was probably 83-ish, right? And then that connecting to him making the records that he made in 84 that let us know, oh, Jesse made a record. Now, remember Jesse on the Clubman going back and forth with the fader, da-da-da-da-da, bam, bam. And then I learned that, right? Now Jesse's making records. Soon after, I'm making records. So I think that lineage, that, tied together, you see it, you see somebody doing it, and then you can then become it, I think was the path there, is the long philosophical version of it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, that's President Dewey. I mean, you and Eric, you guys are tied at the hip going through these experiences. What was that like?
It was fantastic, man. I wouldn't have grown up no better, no other way. It was a great experience. We made a rough copy of the It.
Yes.
The Path.
Right.
That was the It, right?
Yep, it was it.
Yeah, the Path. I mean, we were trying to do some crazy stuff, man. And it was about that back then. It was about doing that wild stuff and getting down and gritty with it and doing what you had, with doing what you could with what you had. You know what I'm saying? And
absolutely. And you know what? I got to give credit to Dewey too, in the sense that him as the older cousin, right? Going forth before me, and his investment into into the love, into the passion. You know, he bought the first 12s. He bought Drum Machine. He bought, you know, and seeing him, and even records. And when I think about it, I got to be honest, man. I don't know if I bought 3 records during that time. So between Bill and Dewey, I was blessed with records, you know, and that Dewey had a job at Food Exchange, right?
Yeah.
So that financed a lot of them trips to imports, you know what I mean? And that wasn't cheap business either. You had to buy 2 copies of everything, you know? So I'm sure my mom kicked me down here and there to be able to purchase records, but just, you know, in terms of that investment, I think Dewey was the first to show me that it took some type of commitment investment going down to buy the new music. You know what I mean? Because the way we got into it through Bill, I got to give credit to Bill. The records were already there through Bill.
Yeah.
So I think that was a missing piece in the equation, you know. Something that I've learned since is that part of DJing, and you would know it by these present times because people, you know, just get these hard drives and stuff and, oh, I'm a DJ now, you know. But part of DJing was investing in actual records. You know what I mean? And Dewey was definitely our pioneer in that, is that he was very committed to making sure we had the hottest and the latest.
Yeah, I think it's so important. You know, to your point, people don't realize you had to buy records, and you had to buy 2 of them, and you had to take care of that stuff.
We didn't do that.
No scratch.
Credit for that. We weren't those DJs.
You weren't the guys that were like golds. You look at them and blow them.
We were not rubbing them down. No. They'd be lucky if they were in the original cover or any cover.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Now, as a producer, you've made a lot of cuts. I want to talk a little bit about the cuts, but you also had Kanye walk into your situation as a young artist. Talk a little bit about that and how that all evolved and how that's turned into a freaking $6 billion enterprise.
Had I know, if I had had I know. No, this story is really simple. In that, as I was saying in the pre-show, Kanye came to a session at the studio where my production company was based out of, and it was actually a session that Dewey was running with another producer in the company. His name is Spike Rebel. That's right? Spike was there, right?
Yeah.
And probably brought by Kevin Shine as my guest. Somehow the connection happened, right? As a result of him being there that day, I wasn't there that day. I just heard about him. Dewey had told me about him. His mom brought him back. I guess maybe they lived. Yeah, I know they lived close to the studio. So his mom brought him back and said, you know, can you give my son a job? And, you know, at the time I said, no, I can't give him a job, but I, you know, would love to hear his stuff, listen to his material, thought he was talented, and explain that, you know, yeah, you could come, you know, kind of get developed, so to speak, you know. And that relationship started, and he just fell into the crew, like, you know, he's like a little brother. He had refrigerator privileges at my house, you know what I mean? And I really believed in him. He would play me his beats, but he would start rhyming over the beats, and that's what really attracted me. I thought the beats were great, but I also really saw him as an artist and was enthralled with him as an artist. And, you know, we set about, I put him on his first major label release, a feature on a remix that I was doing at the time. And I had intentions on having him do these features to kind of introduce him to the labels, with the intention of eventually getting him signed to a label. And we started working on the album and the whole thing. And, you know, this was probably over a 3-4 year period time. I developed him and put him on his first show, ESmoove, which, you know, our other brother, right, was doing his Good Times Productions thing, and we curated the stage for him, and we provided the talent, and Kanye was one of the performers, and he was just in the company like that. But now that you know Kanye, right? That Kanye, right? you can imagine how he got a little impatient with the process. So in his impatience, he was like, I want to bounce. And because I had had such a horrific situation with my previous management company, I was determined, and Dewey will tell you this, to never hold an artist, captive by a contract or anything like that. So I was just like, hey man, cool, come back. If it don't work out, come back and see me. And if you try and do anything with this music that we made, you got to come back and see me.
Right.
Anyway, long story short, years later, he struggled through the industry, and probably about 8 years later. So there's his impatience. I probably would have gotten him signed sooner than it actually unraveled for him because we were close. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's you don't know how that would happen. Maybe it would have messed him up. We wouldn't even know who Kanye's name is now. You know what I mean? But point is, 7-8 years later, he finally broke, and then this is the Kanye that we know now. So
that's just a fascinating story, and just a part of, to your point, the culture just attracted so much energy. One of the things you said in the pre-energy is, because I asked, like, he's got to be a different guy than the guy that walked into your studio. You say, okay, yeah, but the same energy. Talk a little bit about that energy.
Well, I think that I believe in all of those things. So I've been a long believer in manifestation and that sort of thing. It just didn't. Now they got words for it and all of that stuff, and some of it is, you could tie it to the Bible, maybe arguably, and all that stuff. But I just think the confidence that came through and the speaking things into existence, he was being it before he was it. So he looked ridiculous then. You know what I mean? He just looked arrogant then. Now he's a genius because he can back it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then to take it the next step further, by him being a multi-billionaire, now he's backed it up financially. And that's what, the world respects as well.
Yeah.
Because you could be a crazy artist all day long, and nobody will take you seriously. But when you got $6 billion, people start to listen.
People started to take notice. Yeah. Now, and that's a fascinating story, but I want to get to you because you've had an incredible run as a producer all over the world, number ones, hits. What was that, experience like as you were evolving as a producer, and how is that giving you perspective of this whole house culture?
Man, I mean, to tell you the truth, without any false humility, I don't know how I got here. You know what I mean? In the sense that really I have no musical talent from a trained standpoint. You know what I mean? You were in the band, at least with Mr. Eames. You know what I'm saying? I have literally no musical talent. What I do have, I think, is my passion back then really drove me in a situation where we came up in an era where there was songs, where there was production, and we learned song structure. We learned arrangement. We learned a lot of stuff just from playing that music, just from constantly being in that music, not just playing it from a surface level, but really being inside that music. When you are taking two copies like we had to get and rearranging that music and doing different things, you got to learn that this phrasing goes with that phrasing. You know what I mean? It's just a lot of different things that come about in that. So I think it's been cumulative in the sense that, again, how did I get here? I got here because I started out playing records. Then I started out making terrible records. Then I started out making a little better records. And then I learned some engineering. So the records sounded better, even if they didn't musically sound better. And then I started, learning how to project manage and get musicians and all that stuff to make my records actually musically better. And then what I learned from the musicians, I started applying myself so that I could write songs better. You know what I mean? It's just a whole thing and so many teachers along the way. I can go back to Leo Graham, who produced Tyrone Davis records, teaching me early in, you know what I mean? And then Candy J, and then learning something from Farley, and learning something from Mike Hitman Wilson, and from Hurley, and Donnell Rush, and just the list goes on, man. Just learning and learning and learning and still learning, just that process. You know,
That is awesome. And Dewey, I mean, you were there for a lot of it. You have your own hit records. What's
absolutely.
some of the things you learned hanging out with Eric, which makes him so special?
Perseverance, number one. Eric will outlast you for sure because his dedication is just like that. He's going to make that record for you or with you, but it's going to be made. If Eric's involved, the record's going to be made, and that's for sure. And Eric has probably the best ear that I've ever experienced. Anybody I'm working with, he has an ear for what is a hit and what is not a hit, for the most part.
Thank you for acknowledging that. Very few people acknowledge that, including my wife.
Yeah, you would know now. She would know.
Now, and I want to acknowledge your wife, who is also a tremendous artist. You've had hit records with her. What has that been like?
Oh, it's an incredible journey. I think that she is one of my favorite voices that I have, experienced in my career. And I think that special to this is she is the epitome of house music in the sense that so many singers, Dewey will attest to this, because obviously he's working with her as well. So many singers come into the game and it's their last stop on their road to stardom. Like, okay, it didn't really work out for me as a jazz singer. It didn't really work out for me as an R&B singer. So now, I guess I'll do this house record. You know what I mean? Whereas her energy came strictly from that perspective, and her progressing from a writer to an artist, is just, a beautiful thing. And again, her voice, I feel like is a voice that is made for house music. Just when you got her on the right melody, it's no other.
This has been Eric, man. I tell you what, this conversation. We tried to have a conversation like a year ago.
Teddy Riley, internet.
I tell you what, we tried to have this conversation a year ago, and I will tell you that, hey, man, this is a fantastic conversation, man. I am just just the insights, your humility, your grace, your professionalism. You truly are a legend of the culture, and I appreciate for what you contribute. I'd be out on the periphery. I remember I was bugging Dewey, like, man, let me get a little taste. I got my horn in the back. Dewey's like, okay.
We should have had you on horn back in the day at the middle stage. We wasn't fully there yet. You know what I mean?
I was all over the place. Y'all remember me back in the day. I'd be running around trying to spin a record, run around on there trying to dance. You
can't stop with the fashion every time. The only time I've been in the parachute store was with you.
I was just trying to figure out what my groove was. But I remember going to the studio. Man, it was late. It was late.
Always late.
And it was late. I mean, it's close to 3, 4 in the morning, and you were sitting there, you were working on this. It was a Ray Charles thing.
Yeah, that was In Excess. Oh, I hate that record. Ooh.
You hated that, man? I loved that record.
It was an incredible experience, but it's almost like Kanye once said, well, I'm quoting Kanye now. How hilarious is that? He once said, like, man, I get to work with Jay, but then you get introspective Jay. You know what I mean? It's like, I want it In Excess with, now I can't even think of the dang old record. You know the one.
Need You Tonight.
Yeah, you Need You Tonight. Yes.
Yeah.
I won't Need You Tonight In Excess. No. You know what I'm saying? I get, Motown throwback, such and such In Excess, which was crazy. But that was a whole experience too. Like working with Mark Hutchins, and we became friends for a short time. He since passed on, of course. But
that's when I saw you in your element. I saw you, and you weren't Eric. You weren't Eric. You were the producer. You were, I was like, oh, okay.
You know what's funny about that, right? So in this new age of mental health and all that stuff, what I realized that I learned is I am socially anxious, right? I have social anxiety, right? Nobody believes it. Nobody believes I'm shy. But exactly what you just said there is a point, because I probably was extremely shy in our interactions back in the day. So then when you see me in producer mode, I'm actually playing a character to cover up my social anxiety. You know what I mean? So I can definitely see it's just full circle hearing you say that wasn't you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. I tell you what, it was fascinating to watch you work and hear some of the stuff that was going on. Daryl Mellow, man, what's happening?
What's
Darlene
up, brother?
Jackson, Lady D, we had on last week. Incredible show, folks. If
Amazing.
you didn't tune in last week, catch that. Go out to House Culture Conversations. Tremendous. We are getting another masterclass this week, and she put it on last week. Hey, Eric, where do you see this thing going? Take us home. Where do you see this thing going?
So metaverse, right? So there's two parties tonight that I would love to be at, right? But in my 50-year-old, 54-year-old body, the mind is willing,
The
but the body not so much.
Right.
The heart wants to be there, right? But I think that in the not so near future, what we will have is parties that coexist in the metaverse and in actual, in real time here, so that you can be any place in the world and party with your friends in Spain, in Australia, in London, and wherever. And I can DJ from my soon to be well-crafted DJ booth that is going to be metaverse ready. And I could tour the world. I could play in 3 countries in one night and not get on a helicopter or a private plane. That's where I see it going, from that standpoint. From a record standpoint, I think that we need legislation. I was just talking about this on Facebook, that protects artists and creators and songwriters or whatever, that a Spotify has to pay a minimum amount for those plays, because it's not going to go back. Consumers are used to getting their content either free or from a subscription base. Those platforms have to pay the people that make the content. So I see that is coming around. And then Maurice and I were just talking, just like literally, an hour ago, about spatial mixing. So I think the technology is going to be in a crazy place soon as well. So you can buy Beats headphones and iPods and that such that are configured for spatial listening, where the music can come from all over. The sounds can come from all over. So you can have a tambourine sitting over here while the horn is coming towards you this way, and the reverb from the horn is bouncing off of that, and it's a scratch over here. Just bananas. So technology.
Well, I tell you what, that's the first insightful, where is it going response. I mean, the whole metaverse thing is intriguing. I know Daryl Mellow, man, has been out there and actually done some sets in the metaverse. Wasn't called metaverse at that time, but is exactly the concept. And I think you're spot on. DJ Dewey B, to get to in closing comments, last thoughts.
Great seeing you, E. God bless you.
As well, brother.
And Darlene Jackson, Eric is a true visionary.
Right.
The company name, but coming from her, that is an extreme compliment.
Indeed. Hey, you guys, this has been incredible. House Culture Conversations. Signing off. We're going to catch you guys next time. Peace. Well done, sir. Well done. That was